You can't be a poor culture fit and problematic to get along with and suck at delivering outcomes.
Sometimes there are people who are difficult, they don't even know that they're difficult. And like genuinely aren't trying to be, but it's like, you're not in the right culture. This ain't the place for you.
Absolutely, but I think it takes a couple 2x4s to the face before somebody realizes that a poor culture fit is a poor culture fit.
I'm sure it will work.
A difficult team member who is good at their job is more likely to be tolerated in a workplace than a difficult team member who is bad at their job. You can't be a poor culture fit and problematic to get along with and suck at delivering outcomes in your role. And I think a lot of companies have team members that feel frustrated because they're like, well, why is so-and-so hasn't been fired yet? Why hasn't this person been let go? Mm-hmm. You see it a lot in like management and leadership roles, or somebody who's like high performing on a sales team or within like a certain group of individuals. It's like, how does this person still have a job? And I think in a lot of places, it's probably because they're pretty decent at their job. And the perception is it would take time, money, energy to replace them. So there is tolerance to their problematic
Do you think
behavior.
That's an ass backwards way of operating in employee culture?
Absolutely, but I think it takes a couple 2x4s to the face before somebody realizes that a poor culture fit is a poor culture fit, and they're willing to do something about it.
So, okay, they're a poor culture fit. What would you define, like, let's break this down. What would you define as a poor culture fit? What is the behaviors, actions? Like, we could aimlessly throw out semantics for everybody, but like, what does that tangibly look like?
Let's use an example of maybe a sales team. So you have 10 reps on a team. Mm-hmm. One of the reps is amazing. They're highest cash collected. They make all these sales. They quite literally wipe the floor numerically with everybody else on the team. Mm-hmm. But they are egotistical. They are terrible at receiving feedback from anybody. They aren't collaborative. Mm-hmm. It's kind of every man for themselves. They don't support their team. They're not willing to help, share, communicate. Yep. It's just me. I'm a rock star. Everybody bow at my feet. And there's like a high tolerance for it. I think probably makes people feel inadequate around them. Isn't direct in their communication. Poor attitude. Hey, can you apply yourself in this way? Oh, that's not part of my job description. That's not part of my role. I think a lot of it is just like, how do they communicate with others? How do they receive feedback? Are they responsible, and are they willing to work as a team and come together with a group of people and support them instead of like, I'm a fucking rock star over here all by myself. And you might be, but the other 9 people within that team can't stand you. So if I paint a picture, that's what it looks like to me. But from your perspective, what do you think that breaks down as like, these are the behaviors of somebody who is a poor culture fit?
I like what you said. The thought that came to my mind is like, you're the extremist. You're either like the doer of all deeds, or you're like the, let me pass this off to the next person. Those are my favorite people. I do think there are situations where the person who you might perceive as the pass off isn't actually a pass off. They are just very internally aware of what is for them and what isn't. The other one that comes to mind to me is there are a lot of people who they are difficult because they are never actually in problem solving mode. They're in either problem creation mode or they're in problem perpetuating mode. So I think like a simple example is anytime there's something that comes up in a group that there isn't like a straightforward SOP or like some pre-communicated notion of like how we handle this, people just default into, oh my God, like we've never had this happen. What do we do? Like, it's almost like there's no critical thinking that maybe like this is not that difficult. It can be as simple as either you need to identify who the right person is to talk to about how to handle it, or you need to identify if it's even a problem that is your responsibility. And if it's not, at least make the person who is aware, whose problem it would be, aware. Like that's proactive to me. There are so many people I've seen in organizations. I've seen this with small business owners too as they're growing teams. They end up in this situation with team members where it's like they just can't do anything other than identify problems or perpetuate them because they don't want to take a second to step back and be like, let me identify this issue. This is what it looks like, or this is who it needs to go to. Or if I have to figure it out, because sometimes on the fly you don't have a choice, what is the most responsible path? And I think that's a big thing with people who become difficult is as a business grows or as an organization grows, you're bound to be presented with problems that you don't inherently have answers to or have never experienced. And so you are a difficult team member if as things are happening, you just dive into, oh my God, we have a problem, or oh my God, like this is such a big problem, or like making it worse. So that's what comes to my mind. I think the extremist, the I don't do anything or I do fucking everything, that's nightmarish. The person who does everything is wants to be somebody they aren't, I think. And then the person who does nothing wants to go like hyper descriptive. I remember a situation at a company I was working at where the person was like, that's not in my job description specifically, so that doesn't fall under my responsibility. And I was like, I can't believe that you have nothing on your plate and you're being asked to do something that's actually adjacent and supportive, and that is the answer you go to. I'm not saying you're always responsible, but like just a pure lack of willingness not to even help or support, I think that was always something that I didn't like. I actually had a specific situation happen when I was in software consulting where there was an issue that was technically like the support group's job, which is the group I was a part of. And the consultant sent it over and I said, I would love your support. And he was like, that's your job. And I'm like, you like designed the system. I'm asking for help from the person who's experiencing it. And I get it's a support issue, but like not even that makes you difficult, like cross organization. So I think for a lot of people, it's both like you either are too extreme on what is yours or too extreme on what's not yours. That's one. And then two, it's are you someone who creates problems or perpetuates existing ones? And a lot of times when they're perpetuating existing ones, it's like this could be so simple if you just like took a second to decide like I can figure out a way to answer this. But I think that feeds into the original problem where it's like you're either the I don't do anything to solve the problem or I just do all of it to solve the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah. A thought that's coming to my mind when it comes to problematic team members is, I think, and maybe it falls into the category of people being extreme, not being able to handle change. There's some people that perform really well when everything looks the way they think it should based on how it has been up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to rethink things. The company changes, what you're doing, like there's a big shift. And that person all of a sudden just gets stuck, like ruminating in the past. Like that also becomes difficult over time. I understand this is different. I understand there's uncertainty. At some point in time, though, like you have to let it go and move forward. And I think a lot of people get let go because of behavior like that. Companies grow, things move on, shit changes. The train keeps going forward if the business wants to keep moving. If you fight that change and you don't like it and everything is an objection to like new solutions, like at some point, like you will just straight up be fired because you become a cog in the wheel of moving forward. I think that also falls into like you become a poor culture fit. And this might get like a little bit personal development and like inner work side of stuff, but I think people can be really solid. An event happens and it just unearths something in them that they haven't sorted through. And if they don't, then over time, that person struggles in their role and they become, and maybe they weren't the best culture fit to begin with, but it becomes exacerbated based on what happens within the company.
As you were saying that the whole company growth thing, I think we were talking about it earlier with someone where it was like, it's not unusual for a growing business to see quite a bit of employee turnover, especially early on. And it's not so much you were trying to get people fired or like people couldn't have been good fits. It's there was lack of leadership, there was lack of communication, there was changes in culture, there was changes in needs. So when you're saying all that, that's another thing that comes to my mind is the things that actually cause the difficulty, or like the environments that create difficulty. What do you think are the things that facilitate difficult team members from an organizational standpoint? Because I think it's easy to be like, oh, this person's difficult, but at the end of the day, it's the company's responsible for it, right? So how do companies contribute to places where difficult employees become the norm? Because there are plenty of companies, I have personally experienced it, that there's a lot of difficult people in an organization. And I hear people be like, well, it's inevitable if you have 400,000 employees that you're going to have some bad eggs.
If I answered this without being like, these are the bad eggs, like, what about all the other people that maybe don't fall into the camp of like, you're just straight up a pain in the ass as a human being? I think sometimes company makes promises that they don't deliver on.
Yes.
Which is the fastest way to kill interest for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it like in a romantic relationship. You get married, your partner's like, you've never traveled before. We're going to get married, do this, and then we're going to go on a honeymoon to Greece. And the honeymoon to Greece never happens because it's like, oh, but this work thing came up and I got to go do this for my friend Jim. And all of a sudden, like, there's just so many excuses that compound. It's like, but you promised this thing at this point in time. Eventually your partner is just like, you're full of shit and you don't follow through on what you say you're going to, and they become disengaged. So I think, one, we make promises that we don't fulfill on, or we say things, we're short-sighted in our decision making, or maybe we're not quite ready to take it to that point yet, whether that's promote somebody, replace a role, build something out. So you create this vision for somebody, but you're not even remotely close to being ready and or willing to take that step.
Yeah.
The team member doesn't give a fuck.
Yep.
At all. You would have been better to just keep your mouth shut. So I think that's one way that it shows up. I think another way is like, hey, we're going to terminate this person. Having conversations of like, this person maybe doesn't need to be in a role, or like they're watching something happen and then that person never ends up being let go. Again, you didn't follow through. I think the root of it is that you don't follow through on your word. And that could be promotion-wise, growth-wise, or handling shit you said that you were going to deal with. So I think that's one way. Not appreciating people for their contributions, not noticing how much they do and the impact and the influence they have on the company. Just adding more and more work to their plate with no recognition. At some point, people check out. And then they become difficult. I don't want to do that anymore. Or they maybe take a little bit longer to get something done. And like you start seeing behavior change. But I think it's like no different than in a romantic relationship. It's like how you started, like you changed your behavior over time and two people just became extremely disengaged. I think those are like two things that come to mind for me. What about for you?
I think the biggest one that comes to my mind is hiring out of desperation. I feel that especially in growing companies, I think I've seen that more than I can count at this point. There's this like, we need to grow, this is the environment, etc. And so it's almost like you're hiring just to say you hired so you can continue on the path to growing to where you want to grow to, not realizing that like hiring just to hire is never a good idea. Like your turnover in that role will be high. I think that one's a big one. The other one too that I find to be more common, and I'm not entirely sure why, but it's more around poor hiring skills. There's a lack of understanding. I see this in bigger organizations, and I see this in a lot of private businesses too. I don't know if this is not blaming HR by any means, but what I've seen is there's a disconnect between what HR understands the role to be and what they're looking for, and what the department or the role, the person who needs that role is looking for. And I think sometimes what happens is the person who is looking for technical skill or whatever is over indexing on technical skill and not enough on human. And then what happens with HR is you're indexing on human, but there's just such a fundamental lack of technical skill that leads to this like nebulous situation where it's like, oh, I found a really good person, but you put a marketer in software coding. Like that doesn't make sense. And I'm using a very extreme example, but it does happen. I've seen in many cases where it's wrong, maybe right type of person, wrong role, or right for a role, but wrong type of person. And I think those can, in both cases, very much be organizational suicide. Because if you have it happen once, that's one thing like we can learn. And sometimes when companies are growing quickly, it's kind of inevitable. But I think if you start making that a repeat theme, you can very much kill morale of the people who are there. If you consistently don't hire the right person, whether it's from poor hiring skills or it's from this like, I need to hire fast, otherwise the world's fucked. I find that tends to become very counterproductive for cultures. And I think when you are not careful, hiring is the hardest thing I think to do in a business. I think the game of people is far more complex than the game of actually like buy and sell stuff. Like business is very simple math. It's sell something for more than it costs, so you have money to reinvest into that process. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Like that's fundamentally what business comes down to, right? The game of people is what's your background? How were you parented? What is your life experience? What skills do you have? Let me try to balance and dance all of that inside of this thing that's supposed to make money. So I think that's one of the big things is like hiring, and on both sides, having poor hiring skills and then hiring too quickly just because you need to fill a role. Those are the two that come to my mind as that's a lot of the times where difficult team members are coming from. Sometimes there are people who are difficult. They don't even know that they're difficult. And like genuinely aren't trying to be, but it's like, you're not in the right culture. This ain't the place for you. You are someone who wants to kind of coast through work and you're in a startup culture, or you're someone who's highly driven, hyper engaged, get me to the next thing, big, and you go to a corporate environment where it's like you can't get an initiative to move any faster than every 18 months. So I think that sometimes is another thing is people don't realize they end up appearing very difficult because they're just in the wrong place.
I think another thing that perpetuates difficult team members is that leaders and managers are very passive in how they give feedback. Man, spell it out for people. I watch business owners and people in leadership roles try to communicate like things they're seeing or behavior that needs to be changed. And it's like, are you speaking through wind chimes? Like, what the fuck just came out of your mouth? It's so passive, right? It's vague. It's not to the point. There's no, hey, I noticed this. This is an issue because blank. What can we do to fix it? And then you find yourself 6 months later and it's like, well, I had no idea that person felt that way. It's like, yeah, because all the feedback that you were given was very beat around the bush. Because I think people want to be liked more than they want to lead. I want you to like me more than I want to have this conversation to move things forward. So coming back to what you said, a lot of people probably don't mean to be difficult and they don't even notice that they are, or what they're doing is maybe not the best or appropriate on that team. And if nobody spells it out for you, it's incredibly difficult for you to change something. So I think that plays a huge role as well. It's uncomfortable to pull somebody aside. But I also think if you're listening to this and you're in a leadership role or in a management role, you have a responsibility to do that. Because if that person ends up getting fired for a pattern that you could have nipped in the ass the first time you saw it, like that does fall on you. Live and learn. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to change, but you were responsible and you had that conversation and you can go to bed at night being like, man, I brought these things up. We communicated this. I made a plan. You're not shocked when you get fired. I think that's really important too for people. It's like when you terminate somebody, I get you downsize roles and like sometimes people don't see it coming or it's like layoffs come and they're like, whoa, I didn't expect my role to be, obsolete. I think when it comes to letting someone go because of behavioral stuff, no one should be shocked on that termination call. And if they are, you failed in how you communicated with them. Well, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. That should never happen. Nobody should be shocked when they're getting fired for having difficult behavior on a team.
What is a prominent memory you have working with someone who was the epitome of difficult team member, whether that was as a business owner or whether that was in your previous life? Like what is someone that stands out that it's like these
I have
behaviors?
so many
If I was
names
like
rushing to my brain right now.
we don't need names. We'll protect
I'm not-
the not so innocent or innocent, whatever you want to call them. But like poster child of like every fucking possible way you could have been difficult. You are difficult. Do you have any good stories of like, yo, don't be like fucking Ted?
I have two extremes
Go ahead.
of it. One extreme was an individual that kind of falls into the camp of like things are changing and they need to progress and move forward and shift. And that person just held on for dear life to everything that was done in the past. That's not how we do things here. That's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not how we've done it up until this point. Intention and heart was solid. Understanding of the season, clueless. And multiple feedback. Hey, that's not where things are at. This is what needs to happen moving forward. Understand the care. This is what it needs to look like. And just this like ruminating, just self-fulfilling prophecy of being unwilling to experience change. That person wanted certainty so bad that they were willing to just fight on every single decision. And eventually, they ended up no longer being there. You became difficult. You were so used to things operating one way for so long. And then when it shifted, there was discomfort. And yes, that's inevitable. And I understand it. And at some point, like you need to settle that and move forward. So an example is like, you never settled. You just kept spinning. And eventually people get tired of dealing with it. So they just remove you. Learn to breathe through your nose. Put your feet on the ground, your ass in the seat. Like, it'll be okay. So that's one. I would say another side is like, I've interacted with people before who take responsibility for nothing. Nothing is their fault. They are victim of hard circumstances. None of it is like a byproduct of the decisions they've made. I can think of people like extremely egotistical. No, I don't want to take feedback. This is fine. Have you thought about it this way? Nope, doesn't work. But then explosive when they're not getting the results that they want. So both, to me, are like poster children of being a pain in the ass. One is like, I'm going to splash a glass of water in your face to get you to take a deep breath. Maybe you'll come back to earth.
I've seen that way too many times. The explosive thing is always funny to me. It's like you ask someone to be responsible for how they show up, and then it's like, woe is me.
Here's the thing, though. I think that seeing somebody who's explosive is probably easier to quickly identify that they're a poor culture fit than somebody who is clinging so tight to certainty that it's insidious on a team. Because the explosive person, or the one who is like outwardly rude or dismissive to others, like you pick up on that so quick and we're like, oh, well, that's aggressive. And maybe people are like, maybe that's violent or aggressive, or I don't want that on the team. And it's a lot easier for somebody to get to the decision of this is unsafe. I think on the flip side, people who are more passive and don't answer questions, or they make everything a little bit more emotionally heightened than it needs to be, I find them very insidious on a team because people pity them and they feel bad for them. It seems more innocent. And because it's less explosive.
Being passive?
Yes.
I'm curious, what about being passive appears more insidious or like more innocent, if you will?
I think when people yell and they're loud and they take up like physical space in a room, they're intimidating to people. Someone being passive is also intimidating, but it doesn't feel so unsafe. Doesn't feel as physically unsafe. Like if you're trying to give someone feedback and they immediately pop off and they become heightened, raise their voice, start yelling back. Like it's quite clear. This is a difficult issue. You try to give someone feedback and they go like stone cold and they stop talking to you. I feel like there's a higher tolerance for that because it's like, oh, well, this person isn't outwardly exploding. Yeah. They're equally as dysfunctional on that team.
How do you deal with them?
I fire them.
I think that's at some point can be an answer. Sure.
I'm just kidding.
No, you're not kidding though. That's the best part. You're not kidding.
Fire them. Next question.
No, but like, how do you deal with those people? And then again, like, what is the process to? She just went fire them. What is the process of handling that look like, right? Because, I mean, to some degree, you're not probably gonna rip someone's head off right off the rip, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I don't know that immediately firing someone off of a Tuesday one moment thing is like the answer. It doesn't mean there aren't cases that could be the case, but like, how do you deal with it? What does that even look like?
Someone who's passive or someone who's
Who's
explosive?
difficult, like just in general. I think passive and explosive are just as bad.
I don't disagree that they're just as bad.
And I think depending on what type of person you are will dictate whether or not you find one to be more of a more threatening than the other. I'll give you an example. I find people who are explosive less threatening personally, because when I look at you, you're just like a miniature pincher. That's what I see. Like, that's what I see personally. Even in our business, when I see different people at different times, just I'm like, yeah, cool. You're just fucking upset. It's triggered your childhood trauma. Yap. That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
The passive person at times to me has always been like, you're not I can see what's going on. You're not saying nothing. The fuck's going on here? What's going on in that little cranium? So again, like, you might see it as the explosive person. I personally think the passive person is a bigger problem.
I think they're
Right.
both a problem.
I agree. I would agree with that.
speaking
Right.
For other people out there in the world
So-
that might see the passive person
Yeah,
is
100%. So what is the process? Because I think you can't have one process for one and one process for the other, because that's inconsistent, and then people's panties get in the bunch and they're like, oh, I can't believe you. She did this, but so shut up. So
Yeah.
what's the one process? Like, if you were to give someone a process for this is how you deal with a difficult team member, passive or aggressive, or passive aggressive, those are the best. The ones who are both, 12 out of 10. It's like
Yeah.
a circus.
I think step number one is that you need to document it. You might have a gut feeling or see things, and you need to identify, is this an outlier or is this a pattern of behavior? And if it is a pattern, when does it show up? So I think responsibility is like, okay, get super clear. Is this a pattern? What is happening with it? What are the specifics? I think if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, you need specifics to back it up. Because when you go to somebody, which inevitably you will have to, and you say, hey, I noticed this, the first thing out of anyone's mouth is when. Tell me when. Give me a time. Even if they're not meaning to be combative, like, it's so quick to be like, be specific. Like, when did I do this? So get super clear, document it, have a conversation. This is what I'm noticing. Trying to understand. What do we need to do moving forward? Put an action plan in place. And if the behavior doesn't change and it continues to be a problem, then, like, you're gone. I think what fucks people up is that when they have the conversation, they're not direct.
Yeah.
You could have all the receipts. You could document all the patterns. You could have all of this. And then if you get to the conversation, you're like, hey, so, like, sometimes maybe I notice if one Tuesday a month, you sometimes do this. Nobody's leaving that conversation with clarity as to, like, what the problem is and what they need to do moving forward. I also think that it's like, what is the issue? This is the issue. This is what we need to do. And specifically, this is what you need to change. Telling somebody you need to be nicer to Sally, like, what does that mean?
You know what I think too? I think I'm glad you bring this up. I was thinking about this. I don't think it's just like how you said, it's like you need to be nicer to Sally. I actually think the best thing you can do is verbatim. Use actual language of what it is. So, like, if you're being a dick to Sam when you say X, Y, and Z, stop fucking doing that. Instead, if you're looking to create some sort of communication, say this exact thing. You'd be surprised how specific you have to be with the average person.
Yeah.
Like, be so specific, it hurts. Like, if when you are correcting behavior, if you have to go as straightforward as, don't say this, verbatim now say this in this specific situation, and if it's not this specific situation, shut the fuck up. If you have to be
It's
if you
true,
have to
I
be
get
that,
it.
that's how detailed you have to be. And I think part of it too is it has to be a process too. I look at it with team members being on both sides, both business side, management side, all of it. It's you get a verbal, you get a written, and then you get a goodbye. Real fucking straightforward. And I to the point where even verbally, it has to basically match. Verbally, I'm going to tell you what not to say. Here's what you're going to say from now on if you don't want to be perceived as a fucking dick. Then you're going to have a written version of that, and then you can just go home at that point. Like, you don't even need to be here. But what I find a lot of times is for leaders, they will do what you just said, which is like, don't do this. Okay, and?
Yeah.
That's like a sick person going to the doctor and the doctor being like, don't smoke. What do I do instead if I have a problem?
Yeah.
You're fat. Stop eating out all the time. Okay, and then do what? Eat cardboard? Like, we have to learn to be considerably more direct and specific, both good and bad, when we are going through this process. I can't tell you the number of times I have in my working career, but then also in conversational bits as a business owner, I can't tell you the number of times I've watched someone say, don't do that. Here's why that's not good for your culture, but then not be specific whatsoever as to the exact, like, I want it to feel uncomfortable. That's how specific you need to be. You need to look at the situation and be like, I'm going to communicate to you as if you're for. And it's not to be, this is not about being condescending or mean, but genuinely, if people are unaware of what good looks like, they can't change. It's just like a job. If you want someone to do better in a skill set, you have to show them and identify specifically what does that look like. Same thing with dealing with culture fits. Be super specific.
Yeah, I agree. I also think you have to be specific to that degree when calling out behavior.
Yes, 100%.
Like, you can't just give the solution of being specific. It's like, Sally can't stand you because on team meetings, when she talks about this, you huff and puff and start rolling your eyes while the camera is still on the video.
Yeah.
What is going on?
100%.
Not, you come across as disengaged. Okay, well, what the fuck does disengaged mean?
Yeah.
Like, you don't even realize what you're doing.
Yeah.
I noticed this. This is the specifics of it. You roll your eyes.
You know, there's another one.
Stop rolling your goddamn eyes.
No, and this is another one. This is both in management, but this is also in relationship settings. If you feel someone is being a certain way towards you, identifying them as such thing instead of explaining to them what you notice in their behavior is one of the stupidest things you can do. So I'll give you an example. And I learned this in a way that really kind of fucked me up because nobody taught me it. I kind of picked it up after like 3 or 4 conversations. There's like a period of time, I'd say from 22 to 24, as I was like working through some of my shit, that all of the time I had certain friends of mine where I'm like, you're coming off as a dick. And I'm like, is there a penis on my face or something that like you guys just can't handle looking at me? Like, you're not telling me what this looks like. All you're doing is getting upset with me and being like, you're being a dick. So instead of like asking, I sat down, I'm like, let me just find, like, you're calling me a dick. These are the behaviors that are happening. These are the situations. I had to like unconstruct what was happening. And I was like, oh, it's because I say this way. It comes off a certain way to you. And if they just said, hey, when you said this to us this way, I wouldn't have felt like I'm dealing with a bunch of kids that I have to like father in the process to get them to understand something differently. But I remember sitting there being like, this is a lesson for me. Don't ever just blanket state someone if you want behavior change. Like I appreciated them trying to be like, hey, your behavior kind of sucks. But like the blanket statement of you're being a dick, and it was like 6 different types of situations and 6 different types of things I was saying. It's like I had to sit there and crack the code. I can tell you, being on the other side of it, great lesson for me for both sides of the equation. 99% of people are not going to deconstruct what you're being a dick means. And so I'm using that as an example because in the workplace, there's sometimes where I've seen people like, yeah, they're just being irresponsible. What does that mean? Like, break these things down. I don't think the average person doesn't want to understand and change their behavior or be a part of something collectively and be supportive. I don't think that's the average person. But when you blanket statement, what someone is quote unquote being and not explaining how you're coming to that conclusion, they have no idea how to fully change their behavior. They might feel bad, but that doesn't inherently help them understand like what different looks like if they can't pinpoint the specific behaviors that are contributing to it and then the specific ways to change it.
I also think that people don't like to feel dumb.
100%.
And when you give them feedback, if you aren't specific and it's about me and where I'm falling short, it's like you end up feeling inadequate and you don't know how to change it. And you don't know how to ask. You just got told, hey, when you do this, people feel this way. Let's have a conversation. You need to be kinder. Okay. What does that mean? Like, most people in that moment aren't going to be like, hey, can you give me specifics on what that looks like? You're just so uncomfortable.
And have a process too, like how you, with communication, you should not in any world, and I'm not a big should or would person, but there's no world inside of a business or an organization that there is any reason to be having the same conversation 10 times than having 10 written warnings and then firing them. This stuff can be very straightforward. If you want to see a culture change very, very quickly, implement a system for how you get rid of people and demonstrate it one time. Watch how quickly people's behavior changes. Someone might have to be the sacrificial lamb, but like it's a good way to shift culture.
Is what it is.
Very
so
much.
your final framework for someone listening to this, they deal with a difficult team member. Wow.
Communicate what the difficulty is. Break it down very simply, how it's contributing to a bigger problem or what it actually looks like. Tell them not to do it or what not to do, and then how to behave in a way that is conducive to the outcomes that you're looking for. Like, so very, very specific. Every part of this has to be spoon-fed. I don't care if anybody tries to tell you they're a grade fucking A fucking communicator. I don't care. Like, this is true with everybody. I don't care if it's your best communicator or the worst communicator on your team. Take the exact same approach. Very, very specifically. Here's the beautiful part. When you map it out that specifically, there's no room for interpretation. I can't look at you if you say, hey, you've been a dick. By dick, I mean you're saying X, Y, and Z to the team. It is not appreciated by anybody. They want to feel appreciated, supported. So when you want to communicate something, you're going to say it like this. I can't come back to you in a month and be like, I didn't know what being a dick meant. No, you just outlined. You legitimately just outlined what that meant. And you also outlined a column that said how not to be a dick. Crystal clear. So I can't sit here and act confused. Oh, I didn't know that's what it meant. You literally violated it. We made a T-chart. On the left-hand side, it said, this is how not to be a dick. You did bullet 3. Literally, like, break it down like this. You want to do this in your workplace? Do this in your relationships. Bullet 3 on our T-chart from our relationship conversation. You did it. On the top, it says do not. You did bullet 3. No, seriously.
It says, do not.
It says do not. It says be a dick, and then it breaks down behaviors of a dick. You did bullet 3. I don't need to have 1,600 conversations with you on what bullet 3 is on the left-hand column. But like, it sounds very extreme to some people, but like the reality is there's no room for interpretation. Don't be bullet 3. Be bullets, be right-hand column, bullets 1 through 5. That's what we're looking for.
I hope someone takes this.
No, I was
and
honestly
out a T-chart.
Draw a T-chart. Honestly, that can be the new SOP for all listeners and newsletter subscribers. Welcome to the T-chart. Here's how you correct behavior. T-chart. Left side, what you're currently doing that sucks / don't do, bulleted. Right side, how to rectify. Here's what to do. Here's your bullets. Done. It's so simple. I'll even hand you a printed copy and we can both sign it. Seriously, like, this is the fucking communication SOP. What the fuck are you doing? I just don't bet in most cases that you can't send someone out without a fucking instruction kit and they'll know what to do. If there's anything life has taught me is you have to spoon feed and you have to T-chart it. Draw it on a fucking, that's it. We're done. You won't forget. If I T-chart it, you won't believe I'm serious. No, this is what we're going to do. This is why we T-chart.
This is why we T-chart.
It's fine. It's just honest.
Oh. All right. Well, you just changed the world today with your little T-chart.
Changed nobody with that today. Just trying to make communication as simple as possible so you culture fit fucks don't fuck it all up for us. Thanks for tuning in.
Subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next episode.